What's up? Welcome back to Gizmo Motorsports. Today we are going on an adventure to pick up potentially the newest project for us, Spec F3X. Let's go see what kind of chaos and trouble we can get into with this project. So I'm on the road right now. We're heading south about 2 hours to take a look at a possible candidate. It is a 2015 BMW 435i. BIMMERWORLD is currently looking to start up a new spec series using the F30 chassis, which is the 430s and 330s. With this, sort of a very early developmental stage, of course. They have a few cars on track. They just did some testing last weekend. And it's looking like a very promising chassis to develop this on. Starting to wanting to get my feet more wet in wheel-to-wheel racing. I have done some champ cars, one at CMP and Miata, and I have one at Daytona coming up. But as fun as Miata can be, especially stuff like autocross, on the tracks and speed, I prefer a little more space around me, a little more metal, also a little more power. The BMW, obviously the turbocharged N55 will deliver that. This one will have the DCT 8-speed trans in it. Maybe not the DCT, I may have misspoke on that. No, it's an 8-speed, we'll double check. However, I think it's going to be a fun thing to get into. So my goal with this car is to sort of try to do this on a reasonable budget. No, this is not going to be a $5,000 build or anything like that. It's going to obviously be money, but it doesn't have to be a $100,000 race car. You can go out, get on track, meet people, have fun with friends, and not have to put a second mortgage on the house. So this particular car I'm going to look at right now is currently a non-runner. It will need either a new engine or engine rebuild. However, the price for it is absolutely unbelievable. Pretty much dirt cheap considering what the car is currently retailing at, per se. Mileage is reasonable, just under 100K. Body looks super straight, has a clean title. Obviously some parts and bits can be sold off with the interior and whatnot. It's got a red one. I think that's kind of desirable these days. Not so much for me, but hey, each their own. So by getting this at a great price already, rebuilding engines is something that we can go through the process with do-it-yourself mentality. Having the tools already, having the equipment, having decades of knowledge now of doing engine repairs and builds and somewhat building race cars with the E46 S55 swap. I'm not scared to take some chances. So we're going to go take a look at this. If everything checks out, we're going to get it on the trailer. We're going to get it back home and start tearing into it. The idea is we will build this car through this year, get it out on track, test it ourselves, and hopefully by next year there's enough of these around to go racing as a group. They already have a set of few out there, customer cars that they've built. They started kind of developing over the last year, and enough over this year, get a few more, be included, 7-8 people. Let's go racing. So we're going to check this out and see what kind of trouble we can get into. I don't know what we're doing anymore. Lord, like we don't have enough projects and race cars. So keep you updated, maneuver this traffic, and need something to eat. just got back and we did indeed make a deal. So that means we are going to build a new race car after all. It was interesting, not quite exactly what the seller described initially, and of course, does anyone ever accurately tell you anything on Facebook Marketplace? No. However, I still think we have a solid platform and a solid deal and quite the project ahead. So without further ado, here she is. This is 2015 435i with an absolutely horrendous red interior. I think this has been one that was likely black and someone painted, dyed, I'm guessing. Maybe this is just worn, but it doesn't really matter. Most of that's going to get replaced. The part that wasn't really described that accurate is the fact that, yeah, that's the engine. That's no longer in the car. Didn't really expect that. Video I was sent showed it running, of course, had a rod knock. So I guess in a way it saves me some time and effort. But the guy there did actually take the pan off for me. I did see rod number 3 left the chat. It was just the bearing. Rod's still there, so block's good and all that. So question is, do we rebuild this or find a new one? I'm kind of leaning more towards rebuild it. I think it would be a fun project. However, the sucky part when that is the case is when someone else takes things apart or takes it out, then you have the fun task of what's missing and all that good jazz. Because, you know, under the hood here is a whole lot of just chaos. And fortunately, my rigged up strap here held on for the ride. So yeah, it's a whole lot of just everything disconnected everywhere, of course. More fun. But I'm up for a good challenge. I think this definitely fits the bill. And it's also along with the budget-friendly part. I did get this down to a very, I think, reasonable price of what we have here, which is a solid chassis. It appears all the parts are here. I do have a back seat in the truck full of things like a new radiator. Looks like the intercooler's there, exhaust, all that good stuff. So, you know, retail right now on one of these with the mileage is about 15K. And so far we're in a third of that price. So, many things that don't matter, such as the wheels, quite a nice dent here. So, you know, things like that we're gonna definitely change out. Not a likely, we'll definitely get changed out. But I have a friend, my buddy James, who's gonna come on this adventure with me, and we'll introduce you when the time comes, of course. That has some parts from his M4s that he's built, and he'll climb with me. So we have the calipers already, just need new rotors. We have some other goodies and go fast pieces that we can use for this, I think. So yeah, should be fun. Should be a fun adventure. This one, I think maybe the title fell in a washing machine, if you got my hint. I gave it a good look over as far as frame rails and subframes and underneath, and all the major stuff looks good, but I suspect this one maybe has yeah, been ridden moderately and put away damp. This door here seems to be a different color white. We have some interesting creases and stuff there. It's a race car, so we can probably look past it. I'm curious if numbers match on any of this, which I don't know if the doors had VINs anywhere, but you know, we're gonna see. But I think, yeah, solid. I think overall, yeah. So should be quite the adventure. Quite the adventure. So I think next is I gotta get all this stuff unloaded. So I think we'll go get an engine stand for this engine. Start maybe showing you kind of what I saw. I think, again, fully disassemble it. I think it can be salvaged. I think a new crank, used, maybe, if we can find a good one. They did put new bearings in. I mean, I did see it. I mean, he had receipts. So let me tell you the story here. From what was told to me, at least, is the guy bought the car, I'm guessing had engine issues, of course, and they attempted to rebuild it. So he, of course, tells me one story with a mechanic. Fortunately, his name was Peter, and he was fantastic down there. It was more realistic and honest with me about it. And it basically seems like, I think the guy bought this at auction, was going to sell it, and he was a dealer, and maybe, you know, was trying to do the cheapest work possible. His mechanic said he recommended that he replace the rod and crank. So I'm thinking he tried to do the cheapest way, put bearings in it to hopefully pass it down to the next guy. Well, karma is B-I-T-C-H, and as soon as he got down the street about a quarter mile after this rebuild, spun a bearing again and started knocking. So basically, guys, just trying to, I think, recoup probably what he paid for it at auction, which is likely what I gave him for it. It was my guess, because this is what we settled on was his absolute minimum, and it was also my maximum, what I went into it realistically thinking of what I wanted to spend, what I felt comfortable knowing, especially seeing that rest of the engine and talking to the mechanic again. I think he was the most honest with me, that, you know, timing chain was done, all that stuff was there. There's a lot of new parts with water pumps and various other items on here, and I think as long as it didn't get any metal shavings up in the head, and we'll see, right? We'll take it apart. We'll see if there's anything crazy there. If that looks okay, then we probably rebuild this. If not, then maybe we'll find another donor for an engine or find an engine. So time will tell. But I think, yeah, let's go get an engine stand. Let's get this tore down, see where we're at, and start talking a little bit about more of sort of what the goal is with this project, what we're actually going to do, look at some numbers, how we can do this, I think, on a budget, what the budget is, right? And kind of go from there. So let's get after it. Let's do it. Just sadness. BMW sadness. Oh. So Nate, what'd you say about me?
You should be buying shit on a random. It is a what day? It is a Tuesday afternoon. It's a whole ass fucking new BMW.
Yep, I'm insane. I mean, in fairness, it does tell me to check the engine. I don't know what could be wrong with it. Better scan the codes. We have our N55 engine on the stand, ready to tear down and evaluate. But before we dig into that, I really wanted to take a moment and kind of talk a little bit more about what all of this is about. What are we doing? The plan here is to build a Spec Series car. If you're not familiar, a Spec Series car is essentially kind of what the name implies. We're building a car to a set specification that's established by essentially a racing organization or a group or team or whatever. Spec's been around for a while. We have Spec Miata, Spec E36, Spec E46 in the BMW world. I believe SECA now has a Spec Iron, which is a Mustang-based platform. And basically, it is getting all of the cars on a baseline to where they should theoretically be the same. And what you really test is the driver. This is a wheel-to-wheel format, so you're passing, you're being competitive. What's the strategy? What are you doing? It's a high, tense, very engaging racing series. What we're doing here is sort of on the forefront of a brand new class that is being worked out and developed by our friends at BIMMERWORLD. James Clay and the gang there, I believe, see what the future is, but now these platforms are 20, 30 years old, and lots have changed since then. So that leads us to what we just picked up, which is our 2014 435i. This is an F30 series, and I should probably have it memorized by now, but the 4-door and the 2-door version is essentially the same except for the amount of doors, but they each got their own designation. Well, these cars now become pretty plentiful and somewhat affordable, and they handle really well. It's based on the N55 engine, and these engines have pretty much, just like any other BMW engine, maybe has a few things here and there, but with the right care and the right planning, they're actually very reliable. But just like anything else, neglect, lack of maintenance, lack of understanding of how to maintain these cars and engines, get into situations like this where this poor girl has a spun bearing. So, this class is still in development. I have the super top secret files here. You cannot, just kidding. If you actually show BIMMERWORLD that you have intentions actually building a car like this and sticking to it, I'm pretty sure they'll share them with you too. I've been working with Phil Wars there, and I've known him for a few years now. He and Josh there have worked with me on this car here, given certain advice and tips and tricks. And I don't get paid to say this, but the reason why I work with BIMMERWORLD is the fact that I can actually talk to real people. Unfortunately, in this day and time, everybody's getting sold, everybody's getting bought up by big corporations. And a lot of other companies out there, you get chat bots, you get an email, whatever, that it's so difficult to actually get someone who not only will talk to you, but is actually knowledgeable. And on top of all that, BIMMERWORLD has a massive selection of anything and everything you need for your BMW, along with super quick shipping. Fortunately, I'm here in North Carolina. They're in Virginia. Generally, I can get it next day, which is normal ground. But they don't mess around with your order. If it's in stock, they get it out generally that afternoon. So you're not waiting around for your stuff, because there's nothing more aggravating than having to wait extra time to get things. So, with this, went to Phil and I said, hey man, I want to get in on this. I see what's going on with the recent builds. They have 3 cars they put together. They've been developing this for the last couple of years and fine-tuning stuff. And I actually called them as I was going to pick up this car, because there's nothing better than jumping feet first into something. And so he shared with what right now they have in mind. They're going to be very close to finalizing these rules and start kind of getting this class developed, hopefully kicking off a small group of series of racers for next race season for 2027. So with that, what's critical, again, going back to what we're doing with the Spec series, is following the specification. We're not going to deviate. We want this car to be as close as the others as possible, because again, the whole purpose of this is getting out on track with something that's somewhat reliable, that's now proven by BIMMERWORLD. They have a few cars on track. Just finished a race this past weekend with 0 issues on those 3 cars. I believe podiumed in what they were running in that series. And this is going to be about camaraderie, getting with a group of folks, competing, bragging rights, and all that good stuff, and really put it down to the drivers themselves. So now it comes back to what exactly we are doing and what our goals are with this car, and that's going to be building this car with a budget mindset. So I don't want to get anything confused here with anybody and what we're actually intending on doing. By going at it at a budget mindset does not mean deviating from the specifications. However, there are things that we can do to do this on a budget. These cars already are kind of getting into a very affordable, in my opinion. Now, it's all subjective and what everyone's budgets are and what money they have to spend. And I get it. The economy is uncertain. There's a lot out there. But there's always ways to make things work. Flip cars, sell parts, what I do, right? Help fund some of this stuff, have some fun money. These cars right now, relatively decent spec of what you want to find. You can probably find one running and driving for $15K, maybe a few dollars more or less, depending on year and options and mileage. And right now, what I'm seeing here with this build list, if you bought everything at retail price, that's recommended. And they kind of have 2 different options. You can go sort of normal. You can also go kind of high end and do certain things that maybe improve some robustness or some longevity. But, again, this is still a loose rule set in development. But basically about $30,000, you can get all the parts needed to make a turnkey race car. Now, you do it yourself, you pay someone else, BIMMERWORLD can build you a turnkey car. And I think that's awesome. There's a lot of skilled guys there. And they obviously are making cars that work. They're on track right now, running, reliable. So maybe if you're not the hands-on gearhead type of person, but you want to get on track, and you got the extra cheddar, hit them up. They'll be happy to do one. However, I'm a gearhead. I love to wrench. I love to build. That's why I have this car here. That's why I have an engine that's blown up. I want the challenge. I love a project. I love staying busy. So we're not going to deviate from this list, but however, there's opportunities, I think, to cut that cost down. And we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what that budget's going to look like for me and what my goal is, and can we do this? That's the whole part of this series is, can we take all of this and take a budget and stay within that and still maintain this spec? So as far as the budget initially, kind of what I'm having in mind is I'm looking at, I think we'll say on a safe conservative side, a car, maybe mid-range in the years, decent mileage. M Sport, which is kind of what you want to go after with the brakes, front bumper for better cooling. Probably about 17.5. I'm going to say that's about roughly it based on my research. Right now, we have in this car, with this engine and everything, $5,500. I think that's relatively good value. We're about a third of the price of buying one that's already running and driving. So yes, we have to rebuild this engine, but I think I can do that for, we're going to say $2,500. I know that's, a hopeful value. I think it's realistic. But we're going to do it with good quality used parts, some new parts. But we also have to dive into this engine and first see, is it going to be worth rebuilding? I suspect that it's definitely, well, we know that it's got a bad rod bearing. We're going to take a look at that here soon. But I'm hoping that the head's good, oil passages are fine as far as cam bearings and all this stuff. Nothing's gotten torn up. If it is, and we can get away with just a crank and some new bearings, maybe a rod or two, then we're going to give it a shot. We're going to rebuild this because look at it, decent used pieces, which we're going to take a risk. We'll get them in, we'll measure them, we'll check them. But I think, we can get the parts for there and we can do the labor ourselves and we can save that money. So if we can do that, a few auxiliary pieces and parts, most everything seems to be here with this car. I think that we can get this back up and going and be within $8,000 to $9,000. So if we can stay under that or at that, we'll just say $10K. Right there off the bat, we're up $7,500 for buying, running, and driving car, which now puts us into getting the parts off this list much easier within a predetermined budget. I want to see if we can do this at $25,000. And we're going to be able to pull it off? Not sure. I think maybe if we say tops 30, but we're going to shoot for 25. We're going to keep up with the purchase price, and we're going to see if we can do this. See if we can go spec racing, be competitive for half the price. So with the spec series, the biggest thing again is keeping these cars relatively all the same, and so we have a list that we want to go by to maintain that. So it's not only just the parts, but we also are going to be looking at things like minimum weights. Also has to be the particular chassis. We talked a little bit about that. It's going to be either three-door or four-door, the 335 or 435. And again, I mentioned this list that I had from BIMMERWORLD. I don't want to share this because, again, it's not exactly a final version. However, we can talk a little bit about what the basic concepts are that we're going to be looking to maintain, to make them the same, and what we're actually going to touch on this car to make it our new race car. So, first thing is the engine, which right now we've got to rebuild because we're not going to have a race car if it's not moving under its own power. However, with that engine, there's going to be certain things that we need to do in order to put this at a baseline. With the N55, one thing is the oiling system. It is just a single pickup, single pump, high G's, hard braking, not necessarily ideal. So one recommendation on what they've tested is upgrading to the S55 oil system. It's got a scavenger pump, higher capacity pan. It's going to give you better oiling, more reliability on the track, keep that engine happy, so hopefully we don't have another rod bearing issue. There's other things on here too that we're going to look at, and so mainly it's charge pipes, different random things for longevity to keep it happy. So that's number one. Number two, suspension with my chicken scratch. That is another thing that's critical in a race car. You want something that's going to handle well, brake well, and all that's going to be really critical with the suspension. Part of the spec series is keeping it consistent, keeping it ideal, And there's other things such as rear diff. We have different bushings and specs on the spring rates and camber plates, all that good stuff. So that's the other big aspect that we're going to be doing on this car coming up. Next one is brakes. Now this one for the Spec series, not too big of a deal if you get the right car. The right car would have the M Sport brake package, which gives you the larger 4-piston front, 2-piston rear. Generally, they're going to be painted blue in color if you're out looking for a car. Now, with our car, we didn't have that option. Even though it had a lot of M Sport options, the braking wasn't one. However, this is one we do have an opportunity to save a little money. Plenty of people are upgrading their M4s, pulling the brakes. The calipers are the same. We'll just have to get some new rotors to match, which we would probably do anyway. That's going to be one of those items that we want the car to be reliable. Put some new stuff. Don't mess around with tires and brakes. That's kind of the important stuff. You want to stop. So that's the third big item we're going to be dealing with. Wheels and tires, I'm going to kind of put under suspension. I think that's pretty much given, right? This is another opportunity that we're going to be able to work a budget. Wheels are everywhere. They can get a good use set. However, we are going to make sure we follow what BIMMERWORLD is recommending with the sizing. Probably still use what they recommend on what type, because that'll help get us closer to maintaining that minimum weight of the car. That's another important one we got to keep in mind as we're doing all this. Cooling, fortunately, is not really a deal with this. So far, the factory cooling stuff has worked out good, so that one we should be okay with. And it's actually pretty much it. Otherwise, it's going to be interior and safety. Now, this one is the important one. We all want to have fun, but at the end of the day, you want to come back home to your family, to your fur babies that I enjoy, and also maybe not be mangled. I would prefer not to burn alive. This is going to be one we will not skimp on. Now, there's some opportunities that, yes, I have some extra seats around here from the race car, harnesses, different things like that. However, when it comes to the roll cage, fire suppression, making sure we have the proper window net, all of that, and preparing the car for that is going to be our number one priority, as cheesy as it sounds. So there will be things that maybe with the roll cage, we're going to look at some costs here. I bought the BIMMERWORLD kit for my E46 here. It worked out great. I welded it in. So far, it's passed all inspections. No organization had any issues. I've had a few fumbles in the car. I haven't rolled it hopefully ever yet, but we won't try to do that. So no doubts in that. So maybe we get the BIMMERWORLD kit and do it ourselves. Essentially 4 big items for us here. And I know this is a very broad overview, and there's quite a few items on this list. However, this is not too much to really go racing. So this is what we're after. We're going to start tearing into this engine, and we're going to get to the car. So as we wrap up this episode of this series, I want to quickly show the rod bearing in question. And it's not really a question more than factually it's screwed up. It's spun, it's nasty. Did want to quickly show it. The next time we see this, we're going to rebuild this engine. Look a little more at the teardown, likely the assembly process, getting it back in the car and getting this thing fired up and running and driving under its own power, so that we finally have a baseline to get started on this build. So, as a little bit of a tech tip, for anyone who may be wanting to do this, maybe it's your kind of first time, or just in general as a reminder, when you're putting engines on stands or you're working around this type of stuff, remember, we have a lot of weight that we're dealing with here, okay? So, a few things to keep in mind is engine stands. Again, part of this is a budget series. I think this stand here is more than fine for what we're doing. Yes, it's a Harbor Freight brand. However, Harbor Freight has come a long way in the last decade on some of their tools, and the engine stands are one of those. Yes, they still make the really cheesy type that is very cheap in the sense of, I would stay away from it. Still $100. This one I picked up on sale, $170. However, It's got this nice blade design, 6 casters, roller bearing here for rotation, plenty of stability for this engine. However, when you're rotating these around, I do recommend using something what is called a cheater bar, which for my case is just a nice, long, large piece of tube here on the handle that's existing to give yourself some good leverage to control this engine as we're rotating it. Reason being is these BMW engines are a bit top heavy, and I'm going to tell you now, trying to use just this handle included is not a good idea. This thing gets away from you, it spins over, it can either fall over, hurt you, whatever. Don't screw around. Make sure you're doing things the smart way. Another thing is don't cheap out on the hardware you're using to connect this engine to the stand. You want to make sure you're using a very high quality bolt. Remember, we have probably 700-800 pounds here hanging off of 4 bolts. You're not going to normally find what you need at somewhere like Lowe's, or maybe even have a tough time at somewhere like a local hardware store in the sense of like an Ace Hardware or whatever. Check locally. There's plenty of hardware specialty shops, or you can get something overnighted generally with no additional cost from someone like McMaster Car. Use a high grade, meaning the higher the number, the stronger the bolt. These are class 12.9s, and they are M12 by 1.75. That's the other thing, that thread pitch, which will sometimes get you a little bit in trouble in the sense of not being able to find it readily around locally. So follow those few important tips, and everything should be relatively okay. So let's pull this pan off, and let's have a look at that bearing. All right, we got the oil pan off, and here is the carnage. You can see this rod journal here is completely smoked. Now, granted, there's not a lot of ridges there, and it maybe you could polish that out. For sure, it could be easily remachined, but time you factor in that cost, from what I've seen, some really good-looking used units going for, going to be better off just buying that. Going to have to at least replace that rod. You can see this is the rod cap, and you can see the discoloration from the heat there, which means that bearing actually did spin in that, which I can also tell with the lip here on the back side of this bearing. So, yep, not ideal. So these do sometimes suffer from lack of maintenance. However, this car, looking at the Carfax, up until the last owner, had pretty regular maintenance. So I'm not sure, again, exactly what happened. Could have ran low on oil, maybe. Was it someone hooning around and doing burnouts? Possibly. Hard to say. I do know, as I said earlier in the video, I suspect they tried to do a cheap repair here with this crank where it didn't feel bad, and they were like, we'll just give it a shot. Put the rods back, we'll try to pass it to the next guy, and here they ended up with another spun bearing. So they did remove this cap from this rod, I'm guessing to inspect to see what's what, and that's looking pretty good. So they definitely knew from the get-go, because they went specifically after this. None of these other ones have been disassembled, so they definitely knew something was wrong here with this cylinder from the beginning. But no worries, we will build back better, make it good as new. So we've got quite a bit of work ahead of us. I'm going to finish tearing into this and see what other hidden treasures I have yet to find. Thanks for joining us on the beginning of this adventure. If you'd like to see more of this, consider subscribing to the channel. I also need some creative ideas on what to call this project. I have an idea. Maybe I'll put it at the beginning of this video or in the thumbnail. Still workshopping it a little bit. However, I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to a new project, a new challenge, and a new build. And I would like to thank BIMMERWORLD for starting all of this and getting this class under development, giving us an opportunity to sort of do this in a budget-friendly aspect. And don't forget to hit them up with all your needs going forward in the future. Not just racing stuff, but everything you may need for your BMW. I use them on a regular basis, even for the daily drivers, keeping all these cars maintained. Again, a fantastic crew there, and we wouldn't be able to do stuff without companies like that. Let's support the small guys. And yeah, you may think, BIMMERWORLD's a huge company. Not really. 50 employees. They've come a long way. Still independently owned and still relatively small business. So let's keep these guys around, keep them fed so we can do fun stuff with our friends. Until next time, thanks for joining me here on Gizmo Motorsports, and we'll see you the next episode. Bye-bye.